Hi, welcome to Money Talk Viewpoint. This is the show for financial professionals who service family offices. These are for RIAs, CPAs, trust advisors who work in the high net worth and ultra high net worth space. My name is Stuart Kruse. I'm founder of Kruse Asset Management. We're a boutique asset management firm and virtual family office. For those who are not familiar with what a family office space is, it's where a family has enough money to hire a team of professionals working together on their behalf. Now, a lot of investors don't have that kind of money so that they have an entire payroll on their side. So we put together a virtual family office, a team-based approach to managing your wealth. So we think that's a superior way to work. I know when I worked at a brokerage firm before, we were not allowed by our compliance department to collaborate with CPAs, estate planners, other types of professionals. But as a fiduciary, I think that's the only way you can work. Okay. I am excited to have on our show Randy Fox here. I have known Randy for better part of a decade, I think. He spent the last 35 years in his career planning, in estate planning, doing high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals for family offices. His major focus is on the philanthropic and family legacy planning, where he helps the families keep more of what they earned. His tagline to me, whenever I've heard him present, is, you know, your estate taxes are optional. So you can pay them or you can choose not to pay them. So he leads with a architect, I'll call him an architect of the family office space. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be going to a 3-day event in San Diego focused on the virtual family office. It's going to be attended by RIAs and CPAs and other experts. And I know from firsthand that Randy's presentation, he's going to be a guest speaker there. His presentation is going to be one of the most attended and one of the most well-received presentations of the 3-day event, or if history is any indication of what this event will be like. So Randy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Stuart, and thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
It's great to have you, and always look forward to having a conversation with you. As I said, I've known you for a better part of a decade, and we got reattached to this team-based approach of managing wealth with each other. And my understanding is your firm went through a little transition. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your recent transition that you're going on with?
And thanks, Stuart. Yeah, just recently. So as you can tell, I'm not the youngest guy in the room. And 3 or 4 years ago, my significant other said, okay, what happens if something happens to you? What happens to the business? And when she first brought it up, it was kind of like no big deal, but it's become a pretty big deal. So I decided to embark on finding a successor to my business, even though I have no desire to ever quit doing what I'm doing. I'm having way too much fun. It's taking me 40 years to get any good at what I do. So why would I quit now? But you know, it is something to, you know, I tell everybody they need to plan. I have to do it myself as well. I approached my friend and colleague and oftentimes planning partner out in Las Vegas, attorney Craig Stone, and said, hey, would you be willing to step into my shoes if something happens to me? And this was 4 or 5 years ago. And he agreed, which surprised me to some extent, but it was a nice surprise. But, you know, as we moved along over the last 3 or 4 years, I also realized that I'm never going to quit and he's never going to get to do anything. And we worked together more and more over time. So we just finally decided to heck with it. Why don't we just start a business where we do this together all the time? And so we just have recently launched the new enterprise, which is a bit of a takeoff on the current name, Two Hawks, but it's now called Family Office Services. And we have an array of offerings to other family offices around the country and to RIAs and attorneys and, you know, the network of people that we deal with in helping the high net worth families get the kind of planning they deserve and need. We think there's a vastly underserved marketplace, and we're just trying to help fill in some of that space.
That sounds fantastic. You know, solving that hit by a bus problem, which is often how it's phrased to me, is, you know, was on the forefront of my mind. So I know you just never know what's going to happen. So it's important to have that legacy planning, and you don't want to be the cobbler with the kids that have no shoes, right?
Yeah, no, it's I've always it was one of those kind of do it one of these days when I get old. Well,
Yeah,
I'm kind of headed that direction.
I think we kind of all are. Now, I'm super interested in discussing the distinction between, basically the architectural work and the implement side work. But before we get there, I want you to just tell me about how your journey was on getting to the high net worth space and the planning side of this.
Well, it's funny because the timing is kind of profound. This is my 40th year in the financial services industry.
Okay.
I have a long background in entrepreneurship. I come from a family business background, and actually, every single one of my relatives is an entrepreneur. No one's ever really had a job. Um, and I started out as a traditional financial planner back in the mid 80s, serving families in my practice was in Naperville, Illinois, which was a booming, growing suburban area with a
That's
lot
where I
of
grew up.
young a lot of young families, two incomes, a couple of kids, the very smart because of the high tech industry that was along the corridor there. So I had more PhDs and master's degrees people than you ever want to know, but they were not horribly affluent. And I just kind of always was interested in working with higher net worth families. And what I found was that I was really good at doing the planning for high net worth families and really terrible at finding them. So I sold my part of the practice to my partner. He and I still remain good friends, and um, he's continued on with my former clients. But I started a business with an attorney friend of mine where we would go to other advisors around the country and offer to help them with their high net worth families. Now, we've had a huge increase in the estate exemption over that period of time. When we started, I think it was $2.5 million a family or something like that. And it got up to five. So we would have all these $10 million families. But I think in over the course of that 4 or 5 years we worked together, we did 250 or 300 family engagements. So I would venture to say that we did more high net worth plans than maybe any firm in the country in that
Wow.
period of time. I don't know that anybody did any more than that. That that you know that firm sort of died off when the exemption went as high as it did, and I just kind of went out on my own and said, I just get the cases I get, and uh, I can get by doing that. But as luck would have it, and fortune smiling on me, we've managed to engage a number of significant clients over the last several years, and we just continue to do the same work, hopefully better and better.
Yeah. There was one year where there was infinite exemption, right?
There
That,
was yeah, you could give away your entire estate the year the owner of the Yankees died, right?
so what was that year like for you? Was it
I
crazy?
think a lot of people just weren't counting on that staying. you know, the alternative was, hey, in order to make this happen, I have to die.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people chose that option. If it happened, it happened. But my clientele tends to be, of the age where they're 55 or 60, not 80. And so I think most of them thought they were going to survive that 1 year of the free pass.
Yeah. What is your line between like the high net worth? Where's your minimum? Is it
Well,
10?
again, we don't close the door on anybody. We typically see people when there's some major event taking place. So there's a liquidity event, and that may not be a $50 million liquidity event. It may be a $5 or $10 million liquidity event. I do think that the market we serve tends to go between low end, I want to say, of $20 million. And typically, the bell curve would get us to about $150 million. Doesn't mean, we have several clients that are 250 or $300 million. But the largest underserved market that we see is between 20 and about 150. And I think, Stuart, that's because these tend to be business owners. The business might be real estate. They might have 20 pieces of real estate, but they tend to be illiquid. And so they're not interesting to the big wirehouses because they don't have money to manage. There's nothing for anybody to do. And they're pretty unapproachable for the rest of the planning world because they're not anywhere they can be found. So that tends to be who our audience is, just from an experiential standpoint.
Yeah. What are some of the unique challenges when you get up? Like most of the people don't have $20 million, but I appreciate that being underserved. What are some of the unique challenges of those type of people that are at that 20 million? Right.
Well, it's they break into a number of categories. First of all, they have terrible planning. They typically have estate plans that were done, when they started the business or when they first had kids. They haven't been looked at. No one's really kept up with them. So as they don't think of themselves as wealthy most
Yeah.
of the time because they're all their money's tied up in businesses or real estate, and it's just stuff to them. It's so they're used to living on the income that those assets produce for them. And if they're nearing kind of the end of a cycle where there's either going to sell or close or walk away or transition to the next generation, they have a whole change of, their whole outlook on how they're going to live changes. So they hit these various transition points. So I would say that's one of the challenges. They don't have sophisticated teams around them, and they don't know the planning language. So they don't even know they have a problem a great deal of the time. They're illiquid. By and large, they have no liquidity, and they will often have the dynamic we all read about: one child in the business and three children not in the business.
Yeah.
And a need to divide things up fairly, whatever that means. And so, even getting them to think or talk about the subject is a challenge. And if we can get them there, then getting them to take the next steps is, just part of the necessary part of the process, but a challenge every step of the way.
Yeah. It sounds like that balance between having a kid in the business and not having a kid in the business. I mean, I have 4 children, so it often comes up. We need to treat you fairly, but not equally, right? You're not the same.
Well, fair and equal are different words, and
Sure.
again, and then you may have one estranged child, and you may have one. We had a case a number of years ago where there was a elderly woman. She had 3 children. The son, during the course of our designing her plan, was in and out of drug rehab 3 times. So, his sisters were fed up with him. They didn't want to have to be responsible for him. No one wanted to be in charge of his share of whatever he was going to get. And it was, 60 or $80 million. It wasn't a small amount of money. So again, all of these things are unique. Even though we see patterns, every family has got its own specific dynamics. And we have to kind of drop into those dynamics and figure out how best to help this particular family. We may use similar solutions, but how we craft those solutions for that family is always unique.
Yeah. How do you strike a balance? It's always taken me aback a little bit. I've got one client in particular who's he will never spend all of his money. He knows it. Everybody knows it. Like it's just an impossibility. He lives pretty frugally and has a very large net worth. And yet, when we talk about planning, still concerned about he himself running out of money. And so how do we balance the planning for the future generations with the preserving the wealth and I don't want to give up control now. Like that's got to be one of the hardest things.
Yeah, and it is. And again, with every client, it's a little bit different. I will tell you that the thing that actually kicked me off doing things the way that we do them now, when I started in financial planning, it was the beginning of the computer era and the beginning of running projections for people. And one of the things I found is with higher net worth families, their attorneys would draft huge stacks of documents, but they really never knew what the outcome was going to be for them.
Yeah.
So we do financial modeling and we run projections out to life expectancy and beyond, and
Yeah.
we can run those numbers 100,000 different ways. So if we have a client who's got a fear of running out of money, we can run if the earth blows up scenario for them and show them that that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, is that the answer? Not all the time, but if we give them context that lets them feel a little bit more confident that they can afford to make one irrevocable election, transfer some money away, we're making progress. We try to model the plans, to the ultimate nth degree. If our clients, we need to meet them halfway, that's okay. It's still their money. We always
Yeah.
have to remember it's their money. And if the sacrifice is some of the money goes to the government, we can't stop them. We can only show them different ways that they can be successful. So,
Yeah, that's totally fair. I know when I first got in the business, especially when interest rates were low on the housing prices and people wanted to pay off their mortgage and their rate of, their mortgage is like 2.75. I'm like, don't pay off your mortgage, please. You can't get that. But I can't put a price on what that debt causes them to lose sleep.
yeah, the people don't make logical decisions, they make emotional decisions.
Yep.
Is it the best economic decision? Probably not. Is it going to help them sleep at night? If it does, then what are you going to do?
Right. So I ultimately I'm pretty stubborn, it took me a little while, but I was like, what I can do is I can put a price tag on what it will cost you to pay this off. I will model that off. And if you think it's worth it, fantastic, let's pay it off. If you don't think it's worth it, then at least you have some numbers to go by. So what are some common misconceptions in the estate planning business in like your area, in your particular niche?
Well, I think one of them is that people pay estate tax. And as you said at the beginning, estate taxes are an optional tax. We can plan almost anyone out of the estate tax if they'll let us. We've got to pull some levers and we've got to be creative. We don't do anything that's on the cutting edge of the law. We do the stuff that's right in the code. And most people just don't bother to take those steps. And occasionally I will, and it's funny, Stuart, every business owner, and virtually 90% of my clients are business owners, hates paying income taxes. They all hate taxes. They will do everything possible during their working lives to reduce their income taxes. And then they either sell the business or they die without planning, and they give all of the tax savings right back to the government. It just makes positively no sense. But they know what to do inside the business. They don't know what to do outside the business. So we spend a lot of time trying to educate that, first of all, you have a choice, right? You can eliminate the government. Secondly, if you, again, another one of my favorite conversations is a gentleman like you might call and they'll say, I have a client I'd like to talk to you about. By the way, they're not charitable. That's in the first two sentences that are spoken to me. And as you know, that I spend a lot of my time doing philanthropic planning. It's kind of how I started doing estate planning. Yeah. They are charitable. Their favorite charity is the government. They just don't know they can opt out. And again, it's a matter of having a conversation where we explain things that most people just don't know or understand. I think that almost anybody will elect some organization that they are currently supporting, would like to support, some cause that tugs at their heart, whatever it is. They'd much rather see it go there than to the government, because we see how the government spends money, and I haven't met too many people that approve of how our budget gets divided up and the rate of tax burn in the United States currently.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it just comes down to the framing. As you reframe the problem, do you want to charitably give money to the government, or do you want to charitably give money to cancer research, pets.com, whatever that thing is?
The interesting thing is that the people that say they're not charitable, when you really dig deep, so they sponsor their little league team, they're deacons at their church, one of the spouses is a member of the PTA. They're community leaders in every way you can think of. They don't think of themselves like Rockefeller, right? They're not going to build art centers. But so what? They could sponsor, they could endow the little league team forever.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'd rather do that.
So in the hundreds and hundreds of cases that you've talked about, I know there's a lot of options. Can you think of a case study that really sticks out in your mind that is an interesting story to tell? I feel like I put you on the spot there.
Yeah, you got the the stump meter up here. Um, I think all of the cases we've worked on are pretty interesting. We've had a number of cases where there's a significantly a case just a couple of years ago. We have a sixth generation shareholder of a family owned business.
Wow.
Very rare to see. The business is his share of the annual dividends, $3 or $4 million a year. And that should continue into the future. But for however the planning has been done for the family up to now, those shares were in his name, in his estate. And we did I don't want to say a masterful job, but we had to construct a structure that would keep the shares for his children and grandchildren without them going through the tax cycle. And so that was a bit of a challenge because we have a high value asset. He's living on a good part of that money. He doesn't spend a lot of money, but he spends, if you have a $3 million a year income, you get used to a certain lifestyle.
Sure.
We had to do some very creative planning to preserve those shares for the next generation and still keep his income high. And we've been able to do that. That plan took a couple of years to implement. We did it in, several stages. But every one of them is kind of like they're gigantic puzzles to me. I always kind of think about, what would I do? How would I get this result? What tools would I use? And then how do I apply assets to those tools to get the outcomes I want?
Yeah, so interesting. So you mentioned charity. Obviously, that's the first kind of go-to on how to reduce your taxes. Life insurance is another tool. Can you talk about that role and what happens if somebody can't get insured?
Well, if somebody can't get insured, we have to use solutions somehow to either get assets that are liquid before death, or to get them out of the estate so they don't cause that problem. Often there's some member of the family we can get insurance on, or there's at some level we can get insurance on someone. We have a case right now. In fact, I think it's coming up to bat on Friday, where the major asset owner is already in his 80s. And his estate is quite significant. He's too old to get insurance. It's not going to work. But he's got a significant other who's quite a bit younger. We are going to insure her so that we can replace assets for his daughters and leave a significant portion of those assets to the significant other. So, there's ways to work around those things, Stuart. It's just every case has got its challenges, and it's our job to find a way to overcome the challenges.
Yeah. Let's start off the show, and just about every show, talking about this team-based approach, right? We have at the core, we have RAAs, which are wealth advisors working with CPAs, and the CPAs are often the most trusted advisor. And then we bring in other professionals such as yourself. Can you talk to us about that team-based approach and how you've seen that change over the year and the value within it?
Well, we are always part of a team. So Craig and I both believe in something called radical collaboration. I don't have retail clients, so the only people that bring me clients are advisors. So I know how to play in the sandbox. I know what my role is. We have to often spirit the advisory team away from trying to make a quick sale and letting them ride with the process so that the process can develop. Because quite honestly, first of all, planning for high net worth people is different than planning for the corporate executive or the guy who owns the hardware store down the street. You do different things, and it requires a lot more patience and a lot more planning. You just have to let the plan develop as it will so that you can maximize the value to the client, which, by the way, maximizes the value to the team. I mean, we do this because we love it, but it also, it pays well. We can all make a lot of money. And maybe that's forbidden to say on this podcast. I don't know why it would be, but you know, if you're patient, the implementation phase of the plan can be much more lucrative. And with some of the philanthropic tools we use, we can keep money around for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 generations, which means the RIAs have sticky assets, right? They have more money to manage. If we reduce taxes and keep more money in the family, and we take illiquid assets and make them liquid, and we create liquidity through life insurance, there's a bigger pot.
Yeah, that sounds great to us. And I think this field, when I first got into this kind of field of money management, it was the first time that people outwardly discussed making money. Like, it was always taboo in every other industry, but in the finance industry, it's like, okay, how are we adding value? How are we making money? How are we making it? So I don't think it's taboo here at all.
We have to add value to every engagement. We have to be great teammates. We have to involve everybody on the team in their thought process. We have to see where the stopping points are, what's holding things up, who's going to do what, who's going to communicate what to the client. All of those things are vital to the success of the team. And again, many advisors aren't used to that environment. They're used to being lone wolves. They want to go solve a problem. They want to go sell the opportunity zone or the oil and gas deal or whatever is the hot commodity of the day. And we always want to say, let's back up. Let's just slow down. Let's really drill down into what's going on here. Let's find out, what's happening in the client's life and solve the big problems.
Yeah. Yeah. The thought comes to mind is, everybody's trying to be an expert in the area. And then one of our catchphrases I think you've seen was like the Michael Jordan struggled in baseball, right? I might be super smart, really good at what I do. My lane might be right there, but I shift over here, I'm just not going to be I don't care how smart I am. I'm just not going to be as good as the guy who grew up doing that work.
And that's a great point. And one of the things I have to say is, I think a lot of advisors are somewhat intimidated by high net worth families because they've been so successful. We think they're good at everything, and we think that everything's organized, and we think that they've got it all together. What they're good at is creating the wealth they've created with whatever skill set it was, whether it's building the best widget factory or being the best consultant or being the best real estate acquisition guy in the world. They're really good at that. But as far as organizing the rest of their wealth and doing all the planning, they're as inept as everybody else.
Yep.
And we can add value. We can really help.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of your biggest challenges in the roadblocks when you're in your work? Is it the clients themselves often? Is it what?
The clients don't, by the time the client gets to us, I think they want the help because you have to go through a lot to get to an engagement, to our family office services. And, it costs money and they know what it costs going in. I think the biggest obstacles are distinguishing how we're different in the marketplace from everybody else. A lot of people say they do what we do, but very few do. So we have to just kind of build our own repute and create our own networks of advisors that know us and work with us and trust us. But we can't serve the entire population. We can only serve who we can serve.
Yeah.
And I don't want to fight with people. I don't want to argue with people if they don't want to do business with me. It's okay.
So let's get into that a little bit. I mean, we're actually kind of probably winding down, but let's talk about your distinctions on and the differences and how you're different from a normal estate
Well,
planner.
again, I think our approach has always been leading by design. So we don't offer quick solutions. We often do good, better, best. Um, we are number crunchers. We are thorough to the nth degree. Craig's background as an attorney gives us an incredible depth of knowledge in every possible situation we could run into between his experience and my experience. We just have we have a pretty deep bench, and I
Mhm.
think that sets us apart. And we're not in a hurry. We always take the deliberate, decided approach. Sure, if someone's got a business sale coming up and it's happening in 8 weeks, and we need to get parachuted in and fix a problem, we do that. We know how to prioritize the work that needs to be done and get it done efficiently and effectively in a way I don't think a lot of other people do, Stuart.
What's kind of that optimal time? You hear about this, hey, I already signed a letter of intent. Ah,
Well,
and
a signed letter of intent is not a deal killer. A binding letter of intent is. So, we have to get people to take their foot off the gas. And by the way, even those deals where they say they're going to close in 4 weeks usually don't. There's
right.
always something gets pushed back. There's always a stumbling block. My answer is the sooner the better.
What is an
But we've
optimal
we've
time?
hit a couple of them where there's 30 days left, and hey, it's an emergency. Can you help? Well, we
Sure.
help.
So Randy, like when's an optimal time? Like obviously, hey, I'm thinking about selling my business in 10 years. You probably don't
That's
want to get into
that's
the
probably a little too soon.
yeah. So
Uh,
is it
a year or
five?
two, out would be unheard of. It never happens that way. Or if it does, those are not the cases we see. We get the case where, the guy was cruising happily along, and someone came along out of the blue and made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
Yeah.
We did one of those very at the very end of last year. We had a gentleman who was 66 years old, had a very successful home services business. Someone came along and offered him, I don't know, $35 million for his business, and he couldn't turn his back on it.
Yeah.
He would have kept doing it forever, I think, but how do you turn that down? Um, so we were able to help him. Uh, was it a rush? Well, it ended up not being as much a rush as everybody thought it was, but it got done.
That's right. Now, I know technology has disrupted a ton of spaces right now, especially with AI and whatnot. I It must touch your industry, but it seems like all the solutions are very personal. So
Yeah, I
where
haven't. I'm waiting for uh, my brush with AI coming into our space. Haven't seen it yet. I'm kind of hoping for it. I'm just not sure where it's going to show its face.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, technology has helped us, people create really basic, bare bones, minimal trusts and those kind of things. You don't have to reinvent that wheel every single time, but I'm not talking about the same space at all as what you're working in.
No, no, no. I'm actually looking for it to do some modeling of charitable gifts, um, and I may start working on that myself. Actually,
Yeah. What do you have what are your aspirations in your field or if somebody, have you gone through and just this is our mission statement or do you have like
well,
a,
as you may remember, Stuart, I have this personal goal I started a few years ago during COVID. I had looked back over my first 30 plus years in planning and realized I sort of added up that I had raised about $1 billion for philanthropy,
wow,
and I decided to 10x that. So I have a personal goal of 10 billion for charity. Now, if I get to 10 billion, I'm going to 10x that and go for 100 billion. Will I ever get there? Who knows? But the thing about having big goals is you hope to never reach them. It just keeps me driving forward every day. Um, Not that I need something to make me drive forward, but it's an unachievable goal is always something to aim for. So
but yeah, I love that. I love that. The tax goal, and we always look at. There's a book, Dan Sullivan, that says 10x is easier than 2x, right?
I got my inspiration from Dan Sullivan's 10x talks. Actually,
Yeah.
I was sitting here during COVID, going, "Yeah, I don't want to 10x my business. I mean, I don't want to have 10, 20 people working for me and be a plan mill and all that, and then all those people to supervise. What do I want to 10x? Well, what if I could 10x the amount of money I raise for charity? I am a child of the 60s. I came through that, all of that era we wanted to change the world. Well, this is the way I can maybe make a dent in the universe. Actually, my goal is to change the way planning is done in this country, because I don't think there's a lot of planning being done. I think there's a lot of selling being done, and that disturbs me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. I mean, that's a really fantastic, inspirational place. I feel very similar. I always wanted to, keep our area more accountable for what we did, and I think those are great aspirational goals. So, Randy, it's been awesome having you on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to seeing you in San Diego. Can you tell the audience how to get a hold of you?
So the company is Two Hawks Family Office Services. By the time this gets broadcast, the website will be up, and all of our contact information is on there. Otherwise, you can send an email to randy@twohawksfos.com. Couldn't spell it all out; it was too long. Those are probably the best ways, Stuart.
All right, sounds great. And I can be reached at kruseassetmanagement.com or stuart@kruseassetmanagement.com. That's KRUSE, or at LinkedIn at Kruse AM. And we also have a YouTube channel at Kruse AM. So you're watching Money Talk Viewpoint, the financial educational podcast for the high net worth and family office space. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, please reach out to moneytalkviewpoint.org. My name is Stuart Kruse. It's been a pleasure to have been your host on this show. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to being better every day.